if that's okay. So I welcome here the Anglo-North Irish Fish Producers Organisation. Is that correct?
Brian Chambers.
Yeah, thank you. And Brian Chambers, Harry Wick.
Yeah, that's right, Chairman. And I'd also like to introduce Trevor McKee, the Chairman of the Northern Ireland Fish Producers Organisation.
You're very welcome, Trevor, as well. So thank both of you for your attendance here. I'd just like to put on record our thanks for the welcome here to Kilkeel as well. It's useful to get out of Parliament buildings every now and again. As well as Kilkeel, I'll be looking for them to come to Fermanagh, hopefully at some stage that other people have to drive to Fermanagh. But anyway, our thanks to Kilkeel Development Association for hosting us here, and for Donna McConnell for her work in relation to this. So again, Brian and Harry, over to yourselves now if you want to.
Thank you very much, Chairman. How we'd like to approach this is we have a few key issues that we'd like to talk about. We'd like to take each of those in turn and then invite questions for each of the issues. And at the end of that, submit what our ask is from the committee on each of the issues. So if you're content with that, Chairman, I'll hand over to Brian to start.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. I'll say thanks for making the effort to come up to Kilkeel here. It's really appreciated, so it is. First one's labour issues. Labour issues is one of the biggest issues that we have, and in particular labour shortages in the Northern Ireland industry, fishing industry, is going to have a serious effect on the fleet's ability to be able to operate. In the past, we've run advertising campaigns locally and nationwide with no success at all. Just people do not want to work. Don't know what it is, but that's... And so we've been forced into using foreign workers, for want of a better phrase, you know. As the industry, we've long recognised that the transit visa, which is the scheme we're using at the minute, is not suitable, and we've lobbied countless times to move to the skilled workers visa. In order to qualify for a skilled workers visa, the fishermen need to pass an English exam, and that has proven very, very difficult. They're skilled men at what they do, and like for me to pass a Filipino or Ghanaian exam would be extremely difficult, to be realistic about things. But as we've lobbied, we've realised we have a responsibility to get these men through it. So we have actually been organising this past years English language classes in Arglass, Kilkeel and Portavogie at the expense of the skippers and the boat owners. So we've recognised that, and we've been making the transition, we were on the road to making the transition to skilled workers visas. And then last year on the 4th of December, the Secretary of State, James Cleverly, moved the goalposts on us, and he made it compulsory for everyone coming on a skilled workers visa to have to be paid over £38,000. And that is just not feasible for the fishing industry at all, nowhere near it. This represents a huge challenge, because before that, on the transit visa, the average that a man was getting paid was about 24,000. So the increase from 24 up to 38 is just not doable. Simply not doable. So we've often heard the claim that the industry is using the transit visa as a cheap labour. Nothing could be further from the truth. Being on the transit visa actually curtails the boats, and that's one of the stipulations when you're on a transit visa, where you have to maintain fishing outside 12 miles. I've just handed around a wee bit of a map there for you to give you some wee bit of a context. If you can see the Northern Ireland, I actually had it in a bigger one here, but when I printed it out in the smaller one, it just wasn't as good a detail. But you can look at the big one afterwards. If you look from the Northern Ireland coast, you see the first dotted line. That's your 6 mile limit. The next dotted line is your 12 mile limit. So the boats have to be outside that 12 mile limit. And then as you keep going towards the Isle of Man, the next solid line, which is the Isle of Man 12 mile limit. So effectively the boats are hemmed in that wee area between the Northern Ireland 12 mile limit and the Manx 12 mile limit. A very small area, which leaves it very, very difficult for us. Quota is set by ANIFPO based on scientific advice, which ANIFPO do every year, and that's what sets the quota. However, when they're doing their scientific advice, it's for the whole of the RAC. And now the Northern Ireland Fishing Fleet has been asked to take the whole of the scientific quota out of that one area. And it's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. And no one's going to take notice how unsustainable it is until catastrophe happens and it doesn't recover. It's as simple as that, you know. But that's one of the issues that we have. Harsher winter weather and boats being forced to fish outside that 12 mile is compounded because traditionally fishermen, they work with the elements, and if the wind was prevailing off the land, they were able to go a bit closer to the land and get a bit of shelter, or if the wind was northeast, they were able to go up towards Port Patrick and get that bit of shelter, and they were able to fish with the conditions. That's all been taken away from them. And the fact it's been taken away from them, we are now effectively have a fishery which is seasonal, because once it comes to winter, we haven't got that ability to work with Mother Nature. Now Mother Nature's totally against us, and we have no tools of working with her or manipulating what she throws at us. And it's just compounding the whole thing. It really is, you know. So, because we're becoming more of a seasonal fishery, Harry, myself, in conjunction with the Fisherman's Welfare Alliance, have been lobbying to move to a seasonal workers visa, which is the option that we favour. For fishermen to come in a seasonal workers visa, they don't need to pass the English exam. A lot of our men, they've been more content, although we've been trying to get to the skilled workers visa, that they have continued to bring the same men back. And a lot of these men have been coming back 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 years. They're good at what they do. They know what they do. They know the runnings of the boat. They know the safety of the boat. And that's a big, big thing. And that's why we're looking for some mechanism to be able to keep the same men coming back, that for a safety issue as well. They know the running of the boats. We could get men that will pass the English exam and get them in the skilled workers visa. But they're not fishermen. And that's the problem that we have. These Filipinos and Ghanaians, they're from a coastal community and they know fishing. It's in their blood. It's the same as here. And that's the core men that we need, fishermen, but they're having so much difficulty. And we've been knocked back, and with elections coming up, no one seems to want to grasp the nettle and make a decision, and we're being left. We're being left in limbo. But just a recent Stormont debate there, the last one, all this was put to the Minister, and he was urged to make representation to James Cleverly. And I think it was actually Colin McGrath actually said, like, a letter doesn't cut it. Lift the phone and phone James Cleverly. Now, I don't know if he actually did or not, but we're now beyond that. I would respectfully ask the committee, I don't know how it works if you put pressure on the Minister or if you see what the Minister's done or what the Minister hasn't done, but I think this now needs escalated to First Minister, Deputy First Minister to get involved, because the Northern Ireland Fleet is struggling. It really is struggling. With the transit visa, the Port of Ugie Fleet, the further north you go, if you see that map, there is nowhere north of Port of Ugie that you can fish outside 12 mile. It's simple as that. Just the logistics of Scotland, Northern Ireland. You see that big line running up the middle. Either side of it's the 6 mile limit there. There is nowhere. And that's where we're struggling. So all that ground is predominantly, not say lost, but the fishing fleet that would have dispersed and spread out are now being confined into that one area. The way I liken it too is, and sometimes you have to bring it down to simple things. If a farmer has four fields and he's told he can only fish in that one field, he'll take a crop out of that one field for 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years. But the point will come where that field will stop yielding enough to make it viable for that fish, for that farmer. And we're in the same scenario. The only difference is when we're at sea, we're out of sight, we're out of mind. and people think, well, just stay outside 12 mile. The sea's a big place. The sea's not a big place. Even in that map there, you think, oh, that's a vast area of ground. There's a lot of that ground that's not adapted for fishing. You know that there's reefs, there's rocks, there's peaks, there's hollows. And that's the simplest way I can put it. If you have a farmer with 4 fields, we are being pigeonholed into farming that one field, and we have 3 fields sitting there doing nothing, lying arable, no good to no one. And it's going to come a point where that one field is going to stop yielding economics for the fleet. And when that happens, the fleet will collapse and we will not get it back. So I would just respectfully ask you to try and elevate this to the First Minister, Deputy First Minister. Any question?
Harry, Ian?
I don't think I've got a whole lot to add to what Brian said. We have been pushing on this for a very long time. We've had meetings with immigration ministers. We've had meetings with various politicians across the water, and we've had very little success. Almost none. And the problem we have is the current government's policy, very much focused around immigration and very much focused around cost of living. But for us, these things pull in 2 opposite directions. Food production needs to be affordable, and effectively that means having entry-level jobs into food production at around minimum wage level. If it's not, prices in supermarkets go up. So that's why, and if prices in supermarkets go up, customers don't buy it. So that's why it's important to us that the salary level set for these visas is appropriate to the market conditions for us to be able to sell food in supermarkets. At the moment, it's not. And we need to address that. And the best way to address that is, as Brian said, move into this seasonal worker visa. It's lots of advantages. It fits the timeline for our fishing patterns. It fits the amount of time these guys want to come to the country before returning home again. And it also has independent welfare checks that the skill visa system doesn't have. So there's wins all round on seasonal visas. I thoroughly endorse what Brian has said.
Okay, thanks, Brian and Harry, for that. Just to ask, is there currently a seasonal working visa?
Yes, there is. The seasonal worker visa is under review. At the minute, the seasonal worker visas are designed for horticulture, but the government has made exemptions when it suits them. So if there's a specific shortage of a specific category, so for example, I think we've had poultry workers to meet demand at Christmas. The rules were flexed then, so there's already a precedent for changing things around the seasonal worker visa, and it's an option we need to explore, and we'd like the weight of the First Minister's office behind it.
Okay, that's useful to know. I wasn't even aware of that, Harry, so that's certainly useful to know.
I think also.
Can I also ask? Sorry, Brian. Yeah.
I think also a lot of large salmon vessels from Norway that work up around Scotland have been given a concession. They've done a deal with the UK government, and they've been given a concession. Okay.
Tell me, you did mention around training for language issues. Is there any other training required in general for those seasonal staff or those staff that come in to work?
In order to go on a fishing boat, you need 4 mandatory courses: first aid, sea survival, firefighting, and risk assessment. All these.
You do all that in-house, do you?
We do all that in-house, yeah.
Okay.
And every fisherman requires that, and it has to be updated every 2 years. So
okay.
they're skilled men at what they do.
Okay. Just another quick issue around the fishing areas. The 6 and 12 mile zones. Just confirm to me, you are allowed to fish in those? If
your crew are skilled on a skilled workers visa, that's the thing. If you have a crew that's on a transit visa, that's the stipulation. You must stay outside 12 mile if your crew's on a transit visa, and that's what's curtailing us.
Okay.
And To compound that, we can't fish in the 6 to 12 mile zone, even with local workers or skill visa workers, if that 6 to 12 is in Irish waters. And historically, the Northern Irish Fleet have fished in the Irish 6 to 12, as indeed the Irish have in Northern Irish waters. But that avenue is now closed to us as well since EU exit.
Okay. So it's extremely limited. Your area is extremely limited.
Can't emphasise enough. As I say, the best analogy is 4 fields, and we're allowed to work. You can see in that map there, on the east side of the Isle of Man, those green areas are wind farm developments. So the Northern Ireland Fleet traditionally would have went across to what they say Whitehaven, the eastern Irish Sea. That's practically been lost. Now you can see that a picture tells 1,000 words. You can see all those green areas, and that's some amount of seabed that's been taken, and that's the danger of the fishermen, that development is slowly going to work its way round to the east, round to our Irish Sea here.
Okay. Michelle?
Thank you. You started off by saying that you have advertised for locals and you haven't been able to get any return at all, and yet traditionally the 3 harbours would have been people lining up probably to get onto the boats. Is there anything that can be done in order to make the industry attractive again, so that actually we can be looking at populating our boats with locals?
I think there's been some societal changes that we have to be mindful of. So probably over the past 20 years, we're almost victims of our own success in society, in that there are very few people who leave school now expecting to do any kind of manual job. So the societal expectation that a 16-year-old will leave school and you go into a factory or any part of the country, or onto a farm or a fishing fleet, that just isn't as prevalent as it was. So how we're approaching it is we are trying to increase the remuneration that the job pays. So we're trying to get those salaries higher by reducing the boat's costs. So not necessarily by asking more from asking the public to pay more. We are also trying to make the job less mundane. So, for example, and we'll talk about it later on in the session, we're trying to bring in automation on board vessels that means that fishermen will no longer have to stand at a bench and take the tails off prawns for hours and then. So if we can mechanise that, we make the job more comfortable, and we hopefully then make it more attractive to our own local people.
Okay, obviously then there's also the issue though of skippers then leaving the industry as well. So you're also losing the boats too. So all this becomes nearly a self-fulfilling prophecy with regards to depletion of fleet, the impact on not only the local economy but broader than just the 3 harbour areas. What are your asks in relation to that, or is that something that you're going to return to later on in the presentation?
I think we'll return to that later on in terms of help employing crew or help employing skippers. We need to get the foundation stable first, and getting the foundation stable is having a reliable workforce here on seasonal worker visas that return year after year, that give the fishing vessel owners the stable business model where they can then think, well, actually, this is how I'm going to bring on. I'm bringing someone in to a stable business here, and not to something that's plagued with uncertainty. So if we can make the industry stable, if we can make the fishing, the model that fishing boats operate under stable, then I'm hoping that will go a big distance to actually us being able to attract people in at the skipper level, at the owner level.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Michelle. Declan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and for hosting this year, and to the Kilkeel Development Association as well. See, in relation to the ask for the seasonal worker visa, are you aware of any, say, representation that has been made previously to the UK government with this, and what was their response?
So we have made representations. We made formal representations through an organisation that we're both members of called the Fishermen's Welfare Alliance, and that consists of us, the Northern Ireland Fishermen's Federation, and the federations from England, Scotland and Wales as well. So we made this plea at a national level on the fishing industry, and the response was that seasonal worker visas aren't considered suitable for the fishing industry because fishing is a year-round occupation. Well, yes, it is, but it's different parts of the year in different parts of the country. So fishing takes place all year round, but not necessarily for Northern Irish boats, or not necessarily for boats based in other part of the country. And essentially, we felt government was really just trying to evade the issue. That it wasn't something that we're prepared to consider because immigration is such a sensitive subject that they don't want to grab it by the horns and actually help industries like ours move ahead.
Yeah. So maybe there may well be a new administration across the water. Well, in a week or two time, hopefully, you might see.
If you can elbow your way to the front of the queue of the bookies past English MPs, that's what the bookmaker will probably tell you.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you.
All right, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks again to you for your briefing here this morning. Just following on from that question, if changes were made then to immigration law and you were approved the seasonal workers' visas, were you confident that you'd have enough people actually applying from overseas to actually come and fulfil the roles here?
Yes.
Yeah?
Easily.
So it is just a visa issue?
We're not asking for different people. We specifically want the people that have already been employed here for some time, so we know where those guys are. We have their phone numbers. We can bring them back.
So it's literally just a visa issue?
Just a visa issue,
Okay.
yeah.
That's all right. Thank you.
Do those guys not go anywhere else then? If they come here and it's only seasonal?
Do you know what? That's the really sad part of this for us, because we have people that were employed in Northern Ireland and Scotland and other parts of the UK. Those people, when they return home, their options are working on a Russian or Chinese fishing boat primarily for $300 a month in some pretty horrendous conditions. So there's a human cost to this too, and a lot of our members, when they're sending these guys back home, they find it absolutely heartbreaking because they become members of the extended family. So, sorry, Chair, remind me of your question.
No, it was if it's only seasonal and they come here for either 4 or 5, 6 months. Once they go back home, then because it's only seasonal, but you're trying to get those same group back for the next season.
Yep.
Do they not go? Is there not always a danger that they go and get some other work, or are they fairly stable that you can get them back, or situation fairly stable enough that you can get the same ones back or similar?
So we've had the same fishermen returning to Northern Ireland in some cases over 10, 15 years.
Well, actually, have one father and son on one boat now with the son actually comes back. But I think that shows that they're more than content to go home for the 2 or 3 months, and the money that they make here more than sustains them for that time. They're well regarded when they get home, and they're quite content to kill that time till they get back again, because they know the boat, they know the skippers, they know the owners, and they're well treated,
Okay. Hey, John Blair.
Yeah, Chair, apologies for being late. I had an appointment this morning that I moved as early as I could, but I still got 8:30. I moved it to 8:30, but it still was wishful thinking. Apologies to you as well, but I had read the presentation. What I'm keen to know, and I was listening to some of the answers that covered some issues I'm interested in, but what I'm keen to know is not to rehearse the issue of the absence of assembly for periods of time, but when the assembly wasn't there, and when there were UK government ministers in position in this place, did you have any interaction with them? Did they come to visit you? Did they sit down and discuss these issues?
Yes, so we were visited in Kilkeel, I think it was 2018 or 2019, by the then incumbent immigration minister. Her name escapes me. I think she's currently the Minister for Women's Rights and Equalities. But prior to that, we met the immigration minister before that in England. I think it met about 4 immigration ministers now, but post 2016, the whole discussion around immigration has been so challenging, and the government's policy has been so rigid that they've listened with sympathy. But you felt that even the immigration minister didn't have the power to make a decision about immigration without referring, to the Home Secretary or to the Prime Minister. So we've had some sympathy, John, but in terms of movement, there really has been.
I won't ask which Prime Minister, because there have been a number of them, but the Northern Ireland ministers, any engagement with them?
Yeah, so we've engaged with Chris Heaton-Harris on it. He did help us make sure that our request was seen by the current immigration minister. But we very much felt like knocking on a closed door.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, John. All right, any more questions? Well, look, thank you very much. Harry, do you want to?
Sorry, Chair, we have a number of issues we'd like to talk about. Labour was only the first, so that probably the longest. But certainly, I've got a couple of issues I'd like to raise to the committee, and Brian has another one.
Well, look, can I ask in the interest of time, because we have a number of briefings, Harry, that we put them all together, before we commit to any more questions, and if that's reasonable?
Yes, the next one is sort of compounded and they're all intertwined, but spatial squeeze. The Northern Ireland fleet's just under increasing pressure, and I've said, but to compound that, there recently, the Isle of Man has closed off 3 separate areas which were rich prawn grounds, and traditionally the Northern Ireland fleet would have persecuted those prawn grounds. They've closed those under the pretence of they're going to do research for blue carbon. We have told them we're not afraid of blue carbon. We're actually interacting with Ulster University this year to do a project out of Kilkeel where we're putting sensors and all in nets to see what interaction there is with the seabed, to see what blue carbon, if any, is released. So it's not as if we're afraid of it. They seem to be cracking a nut with a sledgehammer. But it just compounds the whole thing where more and more ground has been lost. Just coincidentally, yesterday we got a letter from the Manx government saying that they had issued one of our boats with a written warning because they had been fishing all evening and they knocked out to tidy up the catch and they drifted into the zone. Now, the VMS perfectly shows they were doing about 0.2 knots, they weren't fishing, and they have been given a written warning. Now, you could say that's lenient enough, but it was a totally innocent it wasn't even a mistake, it was just coincidence, or it just happened. But the fact they've been issued with a written warning now, if they do have one other misdemeanour, that whatnot, they get the book through at them. But we have letters waited to try and get that rescinded. Marine protected areas, there's 2 sections of that outside the 12-mile area which the boats can persecute at the moment, which potentially could be lost to them, which is it's just squeezing the area and squeezing the area. One's at the north end called the Rig Ground, and one's at the bottom southeast end called Queenie Corner. And if those are implemented as marine protected areas, it's just more and more area that's been lost. As Harry touched on, we've lost access to the Republic of Ireland waters from 6 to 12. We had lost access from 0 out to 6, but because of the voisinage agreement which has been in place, we have access from 0 to 6. But we've lost that access from 6 to 12. And the ironic thing about it is that down round Cornwall or England, French and Spanish boats can access their waters from 6 to 12. But yet grounds that we've fished traditionally for generations has been taken from us. But the fact that we can use those grounds, it means we can keep moving. I come back to the analogy of 4 fields. We can move from that field to that field and keep going round. Because Mother Nature, prawns don't always come in the one area. They'll turn up in this, and the fleet follows them, and it gives this bit of ground a chance to regenerate. And that's the danger. Where the ground that we're fishing at the minute is not going to get the chance to regenerate.
Sorry, what's the answer to that, Brian? Is it to extend the zones, or?
Well, right last year, myself and Harry were talking to DAERA because the Irish boats had been excluded from Rockall, and they've been fighting hard to get access back into Rockall. And we had said to DAERA, in your negotiations, throw in, yes, we'll give you access to Rockall if you give the Northern Ireland Fleet access from your 6 to 12. And it's not going to be a huge mass that's going to wipe out the Irish industry, you know what I mean? It's just, but they didn't seem to heed what was said, and they actually give the Irish Republic access to Rockall, and we get nothing for us in return. I don't know what the deal was, but we didn't get listened to at all.
We did raise it for the EU exit negotiations as well, and Chair, what it boils down to is Northern Ireland's priorities weren't DEFRA's priorities, and we were overlooked.
Okay.
Just the wee last final bit of the special squeeze is the renewable wind energy. And I say you can see from your maps there, about 15 years ago, there was just one of those areas called the Walney wind farm that was developed, and now it's spread out. There's about 5 or 6. But there's a lot of competition for wind energy, and Northern Ireland has to meet its targets. But what we're saying is, as well as energy security, we have got to recognise we need to take food security seriously as well. But not only food security, but the coastal community, which this industry here supports, is vast. You know, it's not just a few boats in the harbours. But recently there, I only found out yesterday, the Department for Energy commissioned Queen's University to do a paper, and they recommended to the Department of Energy that they would prioritise fixed monopile turbines as opposed to floating turbines. I can't get my head around that at all. It apparently, and I haven't seen the report, but it apparently comes down to cost. The energy from a fixed monopile turbine is cheaper than energy from a floating turbine. But the environmental impact of putting a monopile down, you're driving something into the ground for a long time. The noise that puts in, the noise pollution that puts in, no one knows the effects that's going to have yet on the industry. It's a wee bit like environmental vandalism, but you can't see the vandalism, and it's going to be another thing that compounds with the spatial squeeze. Now, we are not against wind energy, far from it. We've embraced it, but what we're saying is engage with the industry and ask us where is the best place to position wind energy that will have the least impact on the fishing fleet. If you see that area there, and that has been earmarked, we were down with the Department of Energy, that has been targeted as a potential site for wind energy. That would be just the last nail in the coffin of the fishing industry. That is one of the richest prawn grounds, I'm going to hazard to say, in the world. And it's renewable. I keep saying this. Wind energy is renewable, but the fishing industry, I think, was the original renewable industry. The fact we have been there for so long and we're so resilient. But I've got on a wee bit, but that's just, it compounds the spatial squeeze, wind energy, but just...
Okay.
I think our ask in that regard, Chair, is that DAERA take a much more robust stance when the ground allocations are made, and that's challenging because the Crown Estate doesn't make any money from the fishing industry. It makes a heck of a lot from leasing areas for offshore energy. So we are up against it, and we are looking to you guys to represent our interests in those conversations and represent them robustly, because Brian does not exaggerate. We are being squeezed out of existence.
Okay.
The issues I would like to raise, Chair, and I'll be as brief as I can. I believe you're scheduled to hear more today about fisheries management plans. There are 3 that DAERA are responsible for. We are, none have been without their issues, but we are supportive of two of them, the Inshore Fisheries Management Plan and the Pelagic Fisheries Management Plan. The remaining one, the Demersal one, has been a bit more problematic for us, and ultimately we can't find ourselves in a position where we can support the plan as it currently exists. Now, there are reasons for that, and I wanted to give the committee those reasons, because I'm very conscious that the headline, fishing industry does not support, sustainable management plan. That can look quite bad, but actually our objections to the plan, I think, are very, very reasonable, and there are three. So the first objection is that this plan is only for the Irish Sea. Our prawn population is considered much more widely than the Irish Sea. So when prawn quota is managed, it's managed for the whole of what we call Area 7, and that incorporates the west coast of Ireland, the Celtic Sea, the Irish Sea, and up towards the North Channel as well. So the Fisheries Management Plan only looks at the Irish Sea. Now, as much as we try to explain to them, fish don't care about lines on a map. So if you're trying to manage a species, it can't be managed by lines on a map. It has to be managed by where it lives. The Fisheries Management Plan doesn't do that. So potentially then, if a fisherman from an EU country fishes irresponsibly for prawns outside of Area 7, or outside of the Irish Sea, it could mean fishermen in the Irish Sea have to pay the price for that. That's not fair. Everybody that fishes prawns needs to be bound by the same plan, and it's not DAERA's fault. It's certainly not the DAERA staff's fault. To an extent, they've been given a bit of a hospital pass by DEFRA on this, on how these areas are divided up. I genuinely think they've done the best they can with the Fisheries Management Plan for Demersal, but because of the nature of the plan, because of the scope of the plan, it stops itself from being properly effective on the grounds of that it doesn't manage species, it manages lines on a map. The other concern we have is that actually it doesn't cover all human activity. So as Brian's already highlighted, the effect of offshore energy on crustaceans can be catastrophic, and fishermen are bound by this plan. We're regulated in our activity, and Chair, that's entirely appropriate, because we need that species to be sustainable. Other interests, namely offshore energy, they're not regulated in the same way, and they need only consider the effect in the environment and don't have that same legal structure that prevents them from doing harm in the way that applies to us. Now, that's not fair either. If you're trying to protect the species, if you're trying to have a fisheries management plan, then all human activity needs to be incorporated in it, because otherwise it's not a fisheries management plan, it's just a plan for managing fishermen. And when a lot of the harm comes from outside, that plan isn't going to be effective. The third objection we have is the composition of the harvest control group. Now, the harvest control group is a group that jumps into action if we see, if we see the lemons lining up in the fruit machine and say there's probably going to be a problem here. That group invites ANGOs onto its membership. Now, we have a hugely positive relationship with the ANGOs in Northern Ireland, and certainly the individuals we work with, we would have no objection to those individuals being involved. But unfortunately, these groups can be hijacked, and not every ANGO is responsible as the ones that were engaged in developing this plan. And we see a risk there of legal challenges for other ANGOs looking to be involved, who have agendas perhaps other than protecting the stock and trying to skew the plan away from a management plan for sustainability towards something that gathers that particular organisation more publicity. We see a weakness there, and we think that weakness needs to be closed off, and those are the reasons why we can't support fisheries management plans.
Are you suggesting that weakness is being exploited by some?
There's a potential for exploitation, and we think that potential should be closed off. So our objection to fisheries management plans aren't because we're against sustainability. we're really not, because if we're not sustainable, we're out of business in 365 days. So it's the fact that really these plans don't go far enough in achieving sustainability. The next point I would like to so our ask around the fisheries management plans is that the committee recognise we're not objecting against the Demersal fisheries management plan because we're against environmental protections or against sustainability. We're not. We're objecting against it because we're not confident that it's going to be effective in its aims, and we think there's better ways of doing it. The final point then I would like to discuss with the committee is the issue of support for the industry. So we have our next door neighbours in the Republic of Ireland have a €258 million, I think it's €258 million seafood development programme. That dwarfs anything comparable in Northern Ireland. Now, I appreciate, there's a lot of budgetary pressures in Northern Ireland. All departments are under pressure, and we're all looking at cuts. But what that means is that we have to use the resource that we do have in a very intelligent way that gives it the best possible bang for our buck. Now, one of the big initiatives we have in the fishing industry at the minute is the automation of processes on board. That's important to us because it will reduce our reliance on foreign labour. It will reduce how difficult the job is and help us then to recruit local people, and it will make boats more profitable by reducing their costs. Now, this is emerging technology, and we're having a demonstration in Kilkeel at the end of the month. You're all very welcome to come along. And we hope, we've got 3 boats that have actually volunteered for trials of this machine over the next few months. Now, assuming those trials are successful, we're going to be coming to DAERA asking for economic support for these tailor machines through existing grant funding mechanisms. Typically, those grant funding mechanisms tend to be capped around 50%. There are circumstances in which we can get more than 50% funding, and we'll be inviting DAERA to explore whether those circumstances can be met for these particular applications, for these particular machines. We would request that the committee encourage DAERA to give the maximum possible level of grant support for bringing these machines into the fleet because of the range of benefits they will bring to our fishing vessel owners. They're really critical for us making the step to the next generation of the fishing industry in Northern Ireland. So we very much ask for your support in our representations at DAERA. And that's the end of the spiel.
Okay.
Any questions, please?
Sorry.
Could I just make a small statement? I've watched committee meetings over the years, and certain industries go to these committee meetings and they speak about impending doom in their industries unless they're supported, unless their aims are met. Well, I can tell you, sitting where I'm at today, as a fisherman of 42 years, my father was a fisherman for 40 years, my grandfather was a fisherman for 20 years, I had to sell my business this time last year. We were primarily a whitefish boat, and the lack of opportunity in that field left it that we had limited places to go to, as Brian's talking about with the prawn industry now, and it meant that we had to go further afield to places we didn't know. We were restricted year on with quota cuts, and it came to the fore that we were the only whitefish boat left in Northern Ireland this time last year with a local crew aboard. And because of that lack of opportunity, and because that we might have to go down the road to get foreign crew, which didn't appeal to me, I had to sell my business. Now, that's the way the prawn industry is going at the minute. It is not a case of it's not going to happen. We used to have 50 whitefish boats in Northern Ireland, and it came to the case where I was the last one. and that was all to do with opportunity, lack of quota. Now, this situation where the boats are getting squeezed into one area is the same situation we were in, and it's not going to work. So, in the case, if you think that this is just a spiel that trying to get something out of the government, it's not. This industry is on its knees, and without a doubt, the same thing's going to happen to the prawn industry as happened to the whitefish industry, without a doubt.
Okay. Thanks, sir. And I don't miss out the issues around all of that. Can I ask just a couple of brief questions myself? The Irish Sea Demersal, Harry, that you talked about, you said it wasn't DAERA's fault. Whose fault is it?
I think it is a problem with how the 2020 Fisheries Act was written, and then how DAERA proposed. So the 2020 Fisheries Act mandated the introduction of these fisheries management plans. I think, now the Department might correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding.
Sorry, just remind me then, the 2020 Fisheries Act, is that a piece of Northern Ireland? Is that Northern
No, that's
Ireland
UK legislation.
That's UK legislation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I believe it was then DAERA's decision as to who would be responsible for what the plan in which particular area. So it's not entirely understandable that Northern Ireland was put in charge of the IRC. You would expect that. But no one tells that to the prawns because they're all over the place.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying it's DAERA's fault?
I wouldn't want words put in my mouth, Chair. I'm not afraid of criticising DAERA when I'm 100% sure of my footing, but it's my understanding that DAERA was responsible for allocating the areas and the responsibilities for fisheries management plans.
Okay, well, look, we'll find out a bit more from DAERA maybe when they come in front of us over that. Okay, just on the support mechanisms, when you talk about the support and maybe 50% or more for the project, what sort of money are you talking about overall to make a reasonable assessment of all the kit that would be required?
So we maybe have 60 prawn trawlers operating in Northern Ireland at the minute. Those trawlers are of different sizes. These machines cost between 110 and 180,000 pounds each. Now, we wouldn't expect every we wouldn't expect every vessel to adopt the machine in year one. It would be a rolling programme. But the costs of these machines are significant, and that's why fishermen are reliant on help, because there isn't a fisherman in the fleet, certainly in the prawn fleet, who could sit now and write a cheque for £180,000 and think, brilliant, I don't have to worry about it.
Okay. And just finally, I don't know whether you're the right organisation to ask, or maybe it's DAERA or ANIFPO that I need to ask. But the amount of catch, because I listened to you, Trevor, saying about how your fleet was decimated and your catch was decimated because of quotas. Be interested just in up-to-date figures on how much catch has been landed by the Northern Ireland fleet in the last maybe 20 years, just to see how it has reduced. So I'm assuming maybe ANIFPO would be
DAERA will be able to provide you with those figures. They keep records of all the landing data. Okay, thanks.
Michelle?
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks again for more information with regards to some of the issues. The point that Trevor has made is quite powerful, and I see that even within the Port of Ogie area, which falls within my own constituency. And I have raised the issue around the Isle of Man fishery closure, which has concerned me because, again, this is further salami slicing of the opportunities that are being made available to our fleets. But I would just be interested to know if you could maybe put some context to that and quantify what that actually means, because it's fine saying that it's closed, but what does it mean financially to our own industry?
It is that this is going to sound evasive, it's not, but the financials are difficult to pin down because the nature of fishing is difficult to pin down. In some cases, it's a little bit like whack-a-mole. The fishing's good here for a period, so the fleet move there, and areas where it's poor, they will avoid. But it is not unreasonable, I think, to suggest that around 20 to 25% of the Portavogie fleet's fishing activity would be in Isle of Man waters. Certainly, when we're reliant on it, we're very reliant on it. There may be, and it'll depend at where you look at a time frame. There'll be other periods where we're not so reliant on it because the fishing's good elsewhere, and that comes back to Brian's point about the 4 fields. The Isle of Man is one of those fields. So there will be times, when that field's very productive for us, and we leave it to recover at other times. So around 20 to 25%, if you look at a long series average, I would suggest, Michelle, is probably accurate.
Okay.
If you look at a smaller time period, it might be quite distorted.
Okay, and I suppose what I was since I became an elected representative and became much more sort of involved in understanding the industry, I suppose what struck me probably most about those who do go out to sea is the risks that they take, and associated that the cost, obviously the cost of life and everything else, but also the physical cost of actually going out to sea. And as you start to remove those opportunities which are closer to home, obviously there's additional costs to that. For those who maybe don't represent a coastal community, maybe to understand the costs to a fisherman to go out to sea.
I think the two colleagues, as a retired fisherman and an active fisherman, are better placed to answer that than me.
Totally.
Go ahead. In terms of personal cost, I said it was 42 years at sea. In those 42 years, I would say I spent 35 of them at sea. In other words, I was 7 years at home in total, if you take that whole time. So the personal cost of going to sea is you lost the opportunities to go to see your son's graduation, you lost the opportunity of birthday parties, you lost the opportunity of Boxing Day parties, where we're always way to see in Boxing Day again. Fishing was my life. That's where everything concentrated on it. Now, I've been walking about now this year, and I find it very difficult to do that because I was always busy at the fishing. But on a Sunday night, when you think about who was going to ring you to tell you they weren't going to sea, how you were going to get a crew, where you were going to go to because of the lack of opportunity, you sit and think, maybe I made the right choice. But there is an industry out there that can bloom again if it's allowed to bloom. Tom asked about the problems with the Fisheries Management Plan. The Fisheries Management Plan is drew up by people that never went to sea. It is drew up by conservationists, it's drew up by NGOs, it's drew up by everybody. The fisherman's representative is allowed to go to those meetings and give his input. But in the pelagic meetings, which were semi-successful, the fishermen walked out after the first couple of meetings because nobody was taking their view into consideration. And that's what's wrong with the Fisheries Management Plan. It is not a fisheries management plan. It is a plan drew up by those who do not understand the fishing industry. And that has been the case over many, many years, where fishermen's views on the cold face, as I used to say, are not taken. And that's where all plans, all conservation measures, all fall down.
As Trevor says, it's very hard to quantify. I've fished them on for 33 years. Missed birthday parties, missed family weddings. Haven't missed a graduation yet because it's happening in a month's time. But you cannot quantify it. But fishing's like the farming. You have to be dedicated. And it's in your blood somewhere or not, But in order to be a successful fisherman, you have to be dedicated. And that with that dedication comes sacrifice. An old wise fisherman said to me one time, and I never forgot it, if you fish all the good days, young fella, the bad days look after themselves. And that's why a fisherman has to sacrifice weddings, graduations, first days at school, because if the weather's good, you have to go to sea, because then once the weather's bad, it'll sort itself out if you're a dedicated fisherman, you know. So it's very hard to quantify the sacrifice. But like farmers, we're a breed apart, and once we lose that, which is a cultural coastal community, you can't just lift people off the street and say, "Here, do you want to start fishing again?" Because it's inbred into you somewhere, no?
Okay, thanks. I was going to ask about the financial side, but I think that says quite a lot. So thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Patsy.
Thanks very much, Chair, and apologies for running a bit late, but I conveyed that to Janice yesterday. Thank you for the bit of your presentation. I want to come back to the Fisheries Management Plan there, which you, Mr. Wick, referred to, that it was a case of managing boundaries instead of managing species. Could you expand a bit on that? Now, non-fishing person, treat me as a blank sheet, okay?
Sure. So we'll take prawns as our most important species in the Demersal plan. Now, whenever the prawn quota is set, what the scientists do is they look at prawn populations from basically from the North Channel. So if you look at the old Armstrong Ferry, everything south of that, the Celtic Sea, so the sea off Cornwall, out to the southwest coast of Ireland, and then up the whole of the west coast of Ireland. So that quota is set. We call that Area 7, and the quota for prawns is set for the whole of Area 7. So that big patch. The Fisheries Management Plan only looks at the Irish Sea. So basically, from the bottom tip of Wales to the old Armstrong ferry route, that is the purview of the Fisheries Management Plan. Now, things that happen outside of the area of that plan could impact the scientific advice scientific advice for prawns. So, for example,
Right, could or would?
It does both. So it has done in the past, and it could still do in the future. So if we look, for example, so the patch of prawns in an area called the Smalls, which is, I suppose, halfway between Cornwall and Ireland, that has taken a real drop over the past number of years, because many would say that's because it's been overfished.
Right, okay.
And the fact that has taken a drop, that impacts what the quota setting is for the whole of Area 7. So that means there's less fishing opportunity then for our boats in the Irish Sea. Despite the fact that our boats in the Irish Sea haven't been overfishing, we see prawn quotas drop because of the actions of others outside that area. So it's the same with the Fisheries Management Plan. So the Fisheries Management Plan brings in a series of actions that must be undertaken if that quota for the whole area drops below a certain level. And we don't think that's correct. So if you want to have a plan to manage a species, it should be over the whole of that species, so the whole of the scope of the scientific advice, rather than just in one geographical area that could be affected.
And what specifically are you suggesting that species management plan should do?
Well, that species management plan should do largely the same as what the Fisheries Management Plan proposes. So there's none of the sustainability, or few of the sustainability measures within the Fisheries Management Plan we would actually propose, or we would actually oppose, because we think, so where the plan works, it's sensible, but it just doesn't cover a big enough area, and it just doesn't go far enough.
Okay, right. Thank you for that.
All right. Just on the issue of the management plan, I'm wondering, obviously DAERA is doing the Irish Sea bit, and I'm assuming DAERA or others, or maybe the Scottish Government, I don't know, are doing their own section. Are you suggesting, maybe I'm suggesting or asking the question, would it be better if they were all rolled into one with a single management plan, or is that too complex?
The whole thing, I think there was a famous Scandinavian scientist who said, fisheries management isn't rocket science. It's far more complicated than that. I think this is an example of it being far more complicated, because in theory that would be the best way to do it, but that's going to be hard to achieve.
Okay. But it does need, each management plan needs to take cognizance of what its neighbours are doing.
They really do need to be very closely joined up.
Yeah, okay.
And that's hard to do. It's easier done within the UK, But when we have neighbours here under an entirely different jurisdiction, it becomes much more challenging.
Understand that, okay. All right, no more questions. Well, look, Brian, Harry and Trevor, thank you very much for your presentations. And obviously we'll take your issues on board and hopefully try to help progress them.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we'll quickly go back on the agenda for it for decision making. Earlier, so just on the Chair's business, there are a few matters I want to quickly run through regarding the summer recess. If that's okay, during the periods of the recess, it is standard practice to delegate authority to the Chair and Deputy Chair to submit views on the releasing or withholding of information in any non-routine or contentious freedom of information requests received by the Committee. Such views expressed would be brought to the attention of the Committee at the first meeting. You agreed to delegate this authority?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Members, okay. Correspondence. Committee team will continue to monitor the inbox and receive correspondence from stakeholders over recess. The standard practice that such items are considered at the Committee's first meeting is a new session in September 2024, which last week was agreed as the 12th of September. However, regarding urgent correspondence, it's up to the Committee whether they wish to agree in urgent matters via correspondence. Such a situation arises, it will be covered in the next formal meeting of the Committee. Are you agreed?
Yep.
Okay. Forward work programme. We'll be considering the draft forward work programme for September, part of this meeting, and will be revisited after summer recess. But are you agreed, because we need to do this formally, that at our last meeting until after summer recess will be Monday the 8th of July? Agreed. Unless urgent matters arises. After recess, the Committee have a new draft forward work programme to consider. The minutes of proceedings of the last meeting before recess of the 8th of July will be signed off as usual at the next formal meeting. This has been agreed as Thursday the 12th of September at last week's meeting. However, I think we did put the caveat in if we thought we had to come back a week earlier. We would do that, okay? Members, just to inform you that normally there are end of session reports for each mandate. However, given that this session has been very short, the Chair's liaison group, which I attended last week, agreed that the end of session reports are not required for this February to July 24 session, and the first one will be produced in September 2025. That'll be for a year and 3 months. All right, content?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Members, at pages 5 to 7 of your pack, there's an invitation from the Managing Director of Regen, dated 20th of June. This is the second invitation we have received to visit Regen Waste Headquarters in Newry and request to brief the Committee. Are you content we add that to our forward work programme?
Yeah.
Okay. Agenda item 3, members, is the draft minutes of the 20th of June 2024 in your packet, pages 8 to 18. Are you content that we sign them, or is there any amendments? Great, thank you. Agenda item 4, matters arising. Refer you to pages 20 to 23 of your pack. Department's response dated the 19th of June to our letter of the 31st of May. This is regarding the pet travel scheme. So you will notice there that it does indicate the documents that are required, but it also says there are no routine physical or documentary checks. So it does say you require to have your paperwork in place and your checks done, but that they will not be carrying out any routine checks. So I think that's where probably the bit of confusion's coming in. So has anybody any comment? This has come up a couple of times at committee. Okay. Refer you to pages 24 to 26 of your pack. Department's response dated the 20th of June to our letter of the 7th of June regarding the level of engagement the Department has had with the Northern Ireland Fish Producers Organisation under the tidal vision on the matter of proposed solutions to tackle the lake pollution, specifically in Lough Neagh. The Department has stated that a small business research initiative is planned, which will provide an opportunity for industry-led trials to develop and demonstrate proof of concept. Officials have advised Northern Ireland Fish Producers Organisation and Tidal Vision of this potential route. I think, members, that would also be relevant to all the other queries coming forward on the same issue. Refer you to pages 3 to 7 of your table of papers. This is the Department's response dated the 25th of June in reply to our letter of the 14th of June, which is an update on progress with ammonia-related planning consultations from the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. We did request clarity in relation to the cessation of prior ammonia standing advice without ministerial approval. So the response states that the decision regarding the cessation was taken on the 19th of December 2023 by a senior officer of the Department under the Northern Ireland Executive Formation Act 2022 after careful consideration and in response to the potential legal challenge by the Office of Environmental Protection. The decision was approved by the Permanent Secretary following provision of the legal advice. The Department is not able to comment on whether it would have been obligated to undertake a consultation on the matter had a minister been in post, as this would have been a decision for any minister. Secondly, we request confirmation from the Department if it had allocated funding for research to look at new technologies that could reduce ammonia emissions, and it states that DAERA commissioned research programme to inform policy on ammonia emissions and has funded research in ANIFPO on a range of new technologies. These are outlined in the response. Any further queries? I think, in fairness, it was William Irwin maybe who pursued this, but okay.
Yep, fine.
Right, members. I refer you to pages 14 to 17 of your table papers, which is further correspondence from Rod Capel, facilitator of Aquaculture Representative Group. This includes a copy of his letter to the Minister dated 26th of February, the Minister's reply of the 7th of March regarding briefing the Committee on the concerns of the aquaculture industry. We previously considered his request at a meeting of the 6th of June and agreed to add it to the forward work programme. Unfortunately, it has not been possible this side of the summer recess. However, you're still content we continue to have it on the forward work programme. Okay. Move on to agenda item 6, which is the oral briefing from the Department on Fisheries Management Plans. If we could ask the Department officials. Members, for background, the Fisheries Act 2020 provided a new framework for the UK to manage fisheries as an independent coastal outside the Common Fisheries Policy. In November 2022, the UK Fisheries Policy authorities met the statutory obligation of publishing the Joint Fisheries Statement. A list of the 3 proposals are found at Annexes A, B and C at pages 42 to 64 of the pack. The timeline is at the front page, page 40 of that pack. Next steps, the Department will finalise the 3 draft plans ahead of a public consultation, which it plans to commence later this summer. So we welcome Colin, Armstrong, Fiona, Taylor and Patrick Smith. Is that right? All the same people. So you're very welcome here today. I'm sure you're no stranger to Kilkeel. So over to you to brief us.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. And
I'm sure before we start you did hear the concerns you were in for the concerns of the fishing industry.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for the opportunity to come and just present you with an update on where we are with the development of the 3 draft fisheries management plans, which the Department is responsible for. So I'm Colin Armstrong, Deputy Director for Marine and Fisheries Policy within Marine and Fisheries Division, joined by Fiona Taylor, who is the Head of Sea Fisheries Policy, and Patrick Smith, who leads on Inshore Fisheries Policy. So, as set out, first of all, in accordance with international law, Northern Ireland and UK fisheries policy authorities committed to managing fisheries sustainably. This commitment supports a vibrant, profitable and sustainable fishery industries alongside a healthy and productive marine environment. The Fisheries Act 2020, as you've heard, it sets out the new framework for managing UK fisheries as an independent coastal state. In November 2022, the UK Fisheries Policies Authorities published a joint fisheries statement which set out the policies to achieve the 8 fisheries objectives that are outlined within your written briefing. The joint fisheries statement also listed 43 fisheries management plans as being the tools that would be used to deliver on these objectives, and DAERA is the lead for 3 of these, which I'll discuss today. As you'll see from your visit to Kilkeel, if you get an opportunity to go around the harbour, the industry forms the foundation of and contributes to significantly to the prosperity of coastal communities in Northern Ireland, provides valuable employment, and domestic seafood production also plays a crucial role in food security, offering resilience in an uncertain world. I think it's very important to emphasise that our fishing industry has been very proactive in taking steps to protect and restore fish stocks. Over the past few years, the industry has brought forward various measures to ensure sustainability. These include the appointment of a Northern Ireland gear technician in partnership with fishermen and science providers, identifies and trials fishing gear for the Demersal fishery. They also appointed an industry sustainability officer who is progressing many of the current issues that for the current and future sustainability of the stock and the environment in which it's operating. The industry also, for sustainability purposes, asked DAERA and requested 2 increases to things such as minimum landing size of crabs, and these have been successfully introduced. The industry, the inshore sector, also very successfully continues to implement a lobster V-notching programme, which has seen very encouraging scientific results for lobsters. So the fisheries management plans will capture this work that's already underway and allow industry to build on these sustainable practices. A thriving seafood sector relies on a healthy marine environment, and fisheries depend on ecosystem functioning, which can be compromised by human-induced pressures, including fishing and other environmental threats such as climate change. The key aim of these fisheries management plans is to create this long-term roadmap for current and future generations, and it will be repeated over the next 6 years and is aligned to the Fisheries Act objectives. These fisheries management plans are the product of a co-design process which has been central to the development, and over the last number of years DAERA has worked closely with the Agri-Food and Bioscience Institute, representatives of fishing industry, both catching and processing sectors, and environmental NGOs. This is an inclusive approach, has ensured that stakeholder input was integral from the early stages and has really shaped the proposals that are before you today. The draft fisheries management plans have also been developed in collaboration with DAERA and Welsh Government, because they apply to English and Welsh waters also. This co-design process, we established working groups, and this will help support the continued collaborative approach with stakeholders throughout the process. Once published, DAERA and the UK Fisheries Policy Authorities will be required to exercise their functions in accordance with fisheries management plans. And these plans will remain live documents subject to ongoing monitoring, review and updates to make sure they remain relevant. So turning to the Irish Sea Pelagic Fisheries Management Plan, which manages the Irish Sea herring fishery within Northern Ireland, Welsh and English waters. The Northern Ireland industry holds the largest share of the Irish Sea quota for this species. The herring is economically and culturally significant and provides employment in fishing and processing and beyond. The industry has invested heavily and has achieved Marine Stewardship Council sustainability accreditation for this fishery. And you'll see the measures outlined in Annex A for that. Turning then to the Demersal fishery, which includes the NIFPO, the prawn fishery. This is the core of the Northern Ireland fishing industry, as you've already heard this morning. The fisheries management plan covers 6 key demersal stocks. These are nephrops, cod, haddock, whiting, sole and plaice within the Northern Ireland, Welsh and English waters. It does not include Scottish or Isle of Man territorial waters. And the demersal landings into Northern Ireland in 2022 for this were worth an estimated 19 million on first sale. Turning to the inshore plan, This focuses on shellfish stocks around Northern Ireland coastal waters, and the key species include crab, lobsters, king scallops and queen scallops. In 2022, inshore vessels registered in Northern Ireland landed a species estimate of approximately 3.7 million pounds at first sale value for this stock. The Fisheries Management Plan also addresses sustainability of the intertidal periwinkle fishery, which has been subject to consultation, which is on your other updates for today. So this provides an overview of the vision and goals for each of the fisheries management plans, which are in your annexes today. DAERA is responsible for the remaining fisheries management plan that are listed in the joint fishery statement, along with Welsh Government for 3, and Marine Scotland has responsibility for 21 fisheries management plans. So I think it's important to say that the divide up of these fisheries management plans was all agreed within the joint fishery statement, which was agreed by the minister, the DAERA minister at that time. So it really is a joint agreement between DAERA and each of the fishing administration about who was doing which plans and where. As an EU member state, the Republic of Ireland must comply with common fisheries policy and which manages European fishing fleets and fish stocks. Republic of Ireland vessels must also adhere to UK rules when fishing in UK waters. So in summary, we've developed these 3 fisheries management plans that have been driven by a robust co-design process and has demonstrated our commitment to sustainable fisheries management. It's been a collaborative effort and stakeholder engagement, and we aim to ensure the long-term health productivity of our marine environment, which supports a thriving coastal community and a resilient seafood sector. So just to provide a very brief overview of it, and very much look forward to receiving views and advice from the committee, and hopefully we can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Colin. Anything to add? No? Fine. Colin, just a couple of issues, particularly regarding the last presentation we heard, and while they were very kind and not blaming DAERA by any means, they did have some issues. One of the issues was that it doesn't cover all activities. I suppose they were pointing mainly towards the renewable energy plans that, that can have a significant impact on the management of the fishing industry. So is there any way to include that?
Yes, Chair. I suppose if you go back a couple of weeks when we were with you previously, we presented an update on the marine plan for Northern Ireland. So it's really important to consider the draft marine plan for Northern Ireland, which sets the overarching framework for managing all activities in the marine area, which includes fishing, renewable energy, and then other activities that we have. So it is a regulated regime. And then in terms of the actual permitting and licensing of other activities, so when it comes to things like wind farm development, those will be regulated through the Marine Licensing System. So there is a regulatory regime through the Marine and Coastal Access Act and the Marine Act for Northern Ireland. And then this fisheries management plan is very specifically setting out what measures the fishing sector must do and what must be done to protect fish stocks. So it's important to see that overarching regulatory regime that is in place. And there is linkages between the two of them. The consideration in renewable energy will have to give consideration to fishing and the potential impacts on fishing, potential impacts on spawning, nursery grounds and things like that. So there is another regime in place.
Okay, I take your point, Colin, around there being an overarching scheme and there being linkages. Is that enough? Because what the fishermen were, or the fishing industry reps were quite clear in saying, and you heard them say it, is that while this is a fishing management plan, all it is doing is managing the fishermen and what they can do, as opposed to the wider plan. And they think, that there should be those activities included in this, which, to be fair, listening to them, I have significant sympathy around that, because I understand why they would be saying that. And so, while I accept about the overarching plan, surely there's a mechanism to also build it into this.
So the connections are made in it, and I think we have one of the particular actions in it. We have said that when it comes to things like renewable energy, we have actually specified a measure in it is that those decision makers. So if we turn to renewable energy, and I totally I can recognise really the point that I think they presented their case very clearly to you about the spatial squeeze issue, and it is going to be a very challenging situation about how we manage the marine area in the future. In these fisheries management plans, there is measures which say that the fishing policy authorities in the fishing sector needs to make its case to the marine licensing authorities around the potential impact of any proposal will have on fishing and fishing grounds. So that place is there. Fiona, is there anything else you want to just clarify on that?
I think probably also what I'd like to say is that the fisheries management plans are a really useful tool to for the fishermen to use as an evidence basis. So we've mapped out clearly key fishing grounds and key spawning areas, which will serve as evidence to support them when it comes to challenges around spatial squeeze or, for example, offshore wind. It highlights the most important areas to the fishermen. So from that respect, it will be quite useful for them.
Okay. Michelle?
Well, thank you. Just to continue on really from the point that the Chair has made, obviously we're more than aware of the regulations and the enforcement that is placed upon the fishing fleet. And it really is about them. They're making sure that their activity doesn't adversely impact fish stocks. But yet, when we look at the issues, particularly around renewable energy, it's about having regard to. So, in some respects, I suppose, if you were a fisherman and you were looking at that, then it would seem much more light touch. And obviously, they're not putting sort of the hard engineering that we're hearing is likely then to be looked at on the basis of the research from Queen's. So, I mean, a fisherman going in and seems to be a lot less invasive than, I suppose, the hard engineering that we're talking about with regards to renewables.
Yeah, so not clear what you're actually asking me there.
Well, I'm just sort of saying from the fisherman's perspective, these plans look to be much more controlling of their activity vis-à-vis that of the those who are coming in to install through hard engineering for renewable energy.
Yeah, I don't think that is the case. I think a construction of a wind farm is going to be subject to the full environmental impact assessment regime. There's currently a strategic environmental assessment being carried out by Department for Economy, which will be subject to public consultation in the next couple of weeks and months. So there is a full regulatory regime that is there, that is applied absolutely equivalently to what fishing industry is being asked to do here, and it's all about achieving, not impacting on the marine environment and making sure that other activities don't impact on other marine activities. So there is an equivalent regime in place.
The fact that the industry have concerns in relation to the Demersal FMP. Is there any? Are we at a stage where this has concluded, or is there still room for those considerations to be taken into play?
Well, it's very much still consideration. So we're still working through, and they have been involved in the co-design working groups and have been there. We're working on a draft. What you've been shared is a very draft. The industry is still engaged in those drafts. There then will be a public consultation and right through to the point at which it's agreed or is time to take into consideration all of those points. Do you want to just mention any more about the working groups or anything?
So we have had industry representation from the beginning of the development of this process, and they have input into all aspects of the Demersal FMP. They have raised a couple of concerns, one about the harvest control group to us, and we have taken that on board. But it is, of course, still a draft, and it will go out to public consultation. It was felt, that we should have a balanced view when it comes to developing a harvest control strategy in the future. And we felt that representatives from the group, a similar format would continue as the harvest control group. So that would encompass scientists, officials, industry representatives, and the NGOs that were present as part of the development of the FMP with us.
Okay. We heard quite a lot from the group in respect of the challenges that they face as an industry, that sort of social side, and also sort of the economic challenges that there are. And I know that, goal 8, you're saying to ensure sustainable use of resources while maximising any economic and social benefit. It's in some ways it's maybe a little bit light, and I guess detail obviously comes much later. But I suppose there has been for quite some time a call from the industry for greater support. Can you expand on that even within the plans as to what that support could look like?
In terms of funding,
well, I suppose in terms of funding, but also just the fact that I think at times they kind of feel like they're very much left to their own devices. And I suppose if there was, a little bit more in and around, assistance to the industry, it might go some way. I suppose maybe to maybe improving relationships, sort of generally.
So in terms of improving sustainability, that will ultimately benefit the fleet. A sustainable fishing industry will benefit the fleet and the coastal communities. We haven't gone into detail about funding within the Fisheries Management Plan because it's not really within the scope of the Fisheries Management Plan. But we have on Monday a motion was passed, to allow a scheme for financial assistance to the marine and fisheries sector, and that scheme we hope to open in July. And we do work very closely with industry on projects and ideas that they want to develop, and if they like to avail of that funding, we very much support them in doing so. We do work very closely with industry in taking forward many of the projects that we've come up with together or they've proposed to us.
I suppose just historically, the industry have felt over-regulated and perhaps not as supported, I suppose, as maybe perhaps other industries have. But I suppose whenever this has been developed, and if you're working in partnership with them and they're articulating concerns, I suppose they feel that they should see some of this reflected in plans, which are obviously going to not be reviewed probably for some considerable time either. So I suppose from the outset, I suppose it's important then to get it right, and if you're working in partnership with them, that they see what they're looking for reflected in that. That's possible to do.
Yeah, and that's the approach we've tried to take. The industry at the very start of this, and over the last couple of years, as we've looked at how we manage the marine area, they said they want to be involved, co-design. So as far as possible, we have always taken into consideration and used them, not presented them with policies that are pretty much ready to go to consultation. Yeah. We've started them with the blank page, and we did that with this process.
And I guess that, but it's still disappointing today that we're hearing from representatives of the industry that they are unhappy with the plan, despite this concept of maybe a co-design approach.
We recognise that industry will not always agree with what we are able to put through, and the way we try to deal with that always is when it comes to the point where we feel we cannot accept something, is we turn back to what is the legislative framework that we as a department have to operate in, and we can't move beyond that. So there's some things which we can't change, and that's where sometimes you may hear the industry still saying they're not happy with what's there.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
John Blair.
Yeah, so some of the issues that highlighted while you were speaking and presenting have been covered already, but thank you for the presentation and for being here today. I suppose the remaining aspect of what I was considering is the timeline of all of this from the joint fisheries statement onwards. And in relation to the developments of wind energy and other renewables and any other actions that relate to the management plans, can we be assured that there was no gaps or lapses in the timeline, particularly in different ministers being there, directorate or otherwise, where some renewables applications may have come after the original and may not have been envisaged by the original joint statement? I suppose I'm looking reassured that everything has been coordinated consistently and that no sort of loopholes or gaps have arisen because of difference in government delivery or timelines of plans for renewables which may not have been done in coordination with plans for the marine plans and other matters.
I think we can give you assurance about that. There's currently no actual marine renewables in our waters at this time, and there's pre-application work going on, but there's no decision yet. Probably the most significant thing that's going to happen next is the consultation on the strategic environmental assessment, and that's what will identify really the zones that are the Department for Economy and the Crown Estate will be recommending, and will be the areas that have the least constraint and the least impact and the most suited sites for renewable energy, considering other marine activities. That will be happening now. That work's underway in doing those environmental assessments, and the fishing industry has been kept informed of that and has been in stakeholder groups associated with that. That'll go to public consultation. So this is all still ahead of us, which is why it's very real to industry at the moment. They're very conscious about it, and there's a number of businesses out there that are developers who are starting to engage on their potential projects. So it's very real.
Your Environment Marine Fisheries team's already aware of some of these forthcoming applications.
Yeah. It is going through a process.
The second question I wanted to ask, and I don't think there's any mention of it here, and I read through a couple of times, impact of pollution in terms of the fishery management plans. I'm probably straying into the realms of the marine plan here, really. But I want to know, given that things here aren't great and the neighbouring island seems to be worse, where profits have become more important than pollution impact, at least to the outgoing government, has that been considered? Can it be considered, or can or is that better left sitting with the marine plan rather than these management plans?
Yeah, that is considered in the marine plan. I think what's important to highlight, I'm not sure if we have specified it here, but if there's any particular stock that would be vulnerable to water quality, maybe the inshore stocks. I'm not sure, Patrick, is there anything around inshore stocks in particular and water
Nothing
quality?
Coming through, no, and then the deliberations at working group level, no.
Okay. But could be brought into consideration if issues arose, yeah. Okay.
All right, Joe.
Yep, thank you.
Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Patsy. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask, for the three management plans that you're in charge of, and for the other 40, I think, that are in England, Scotland and Wales, I know the South, because they're still obviously in Europe, don't have these same plans, but do you foresee any kind of implications to the access that fishermen north and south have, or the relationship they have with the south here, based on these here FMPs that you're drafting?
Yeah, no, we don't see any issues with that. I mean, we have brought in several regulations in our own territorial waters that anyone who fishes in our waters must adhere to, and vice versa, and that's, the Irish fleet are familiar with that too. We also have a formal process where we will notify through the Specialised Committee on Fisheries. We'll notify the European jurisdictions, part of the EU, that fish in our waters. I think that's.
That's right. I mean, any consultations that come, there's 6 months' notice of that given to EU, and any subsequent legislative measures that are introduced, as Fiona said, through that specialised committee on fisheries. That's where the notifications are given. But we also have, engagement with, our neighbouring fishing authorities as well.
So just in regards to the engagement, obviously it's been mentioned here a few times now about our previous speakers and the issues they obviously had with it. But as part of this drafting this year consultation or drafting these plans, you've said you've had consultation or engagement with the fishing industry. What has their reaction been like so far to your proposals? Or has it been that intense, or are they aware of what you're coming up with?
The fishing industry representatives that we've engaged with have been very much been part of the process of developing all of the plans. It will go out to the wider industry, public consultation. So the wider industry, we've only been engaging with the representatives, a few representatives from the industry, Harry and Brian, who you met today, and a few others, and some of the processing representatives. On the whole, they have been well received, but as Harry pointed out, there are a few issues that they have with the Demersal fisheries management plan. When it goes out to wider consultation, we'll be able to get views from the whole industry and from any other stakeholders who have an interest in those fisheries management plans.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Patsy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you. Just back, you heard me, you were there, you heard me asking the industry officials the question about the differential between managing a line on a map and managing the species, and you heard their answers. So how would you respond to that?
So maybe we totally agree that this is an ecosystem and we should be managing an ecosystem, and ecosystems don't have boundaries, administrative boundaries. So
yes.
we recognise the case that they are making. I suppose let's give some reassurance to that. So in the Northern Ireland waters, yes, it's ANIFPO that does the scientific surveys and collects the scientific information. That then goes into an international arena, the International Council for Exploration of the Seas, which is a collective body of scientists internationally. They do the holistic sort of scientific assessment, and they then give the scientific advice to governments. Quotas are then set through our coastal states negotiations. The UK goes to negotiate with the EU and with Norway through those negotiations, looks at the scientific advice and works it out. It then, based on those agreements, and I think that's where it's important to emphasise that, within the EU, their management framework is the common fisheries policy. When we go into those international negotiations, the other states that we're negotiating with want to see what is our regulatory regime, want an assurance that we've got sustainability measures in place. So that's why it's actually really important to have fisheries management plans for our waters which demonstrate there are sustainability measures. There will not be overfishing. There will be all the necessary measures in place. So there'll be an expectation in those coastal states negotiations to see a regulatory regime that you've put in place. And that's where we try then to bring it all together to the functional unit level.
Right, I'm getting that, right? And I know all because of Brexit, we've had all these things, and there are problems in the way now negotiations have to be gone through that weren't needed to be gone through before, at least to the same scale. But as what they seem to be doing was drawing a distinction between management along boundary bases and management of species. Now, can you understand that distinction? And if you understand that distinction, then would you say that that process that you've just explained to us there does, in fact, manage the species?
Will you just pick up on that a little bit, Fiona, and what you've...
Yeah, so I guess the boundaries that we're given to work within were set out in the JFS. So the boundaries of the fisheries management plan are set. We can't extend them any further. But there are other jurisdictions taking, say, other parts of the sea that they will be drafting fisheries management plans for their own jurisdictions. We don't have any authority to implement our FMP on Isle of Man waters or on the Republic of Ireland waters, so we can work with the area of the sea that we have. I mean,
perhaps what I'm asking is just to be absolutely clear about the thing is, does the existing structures within which you have to work, does that allow you for evaluation as to how it's working, and it does allow you for an input to say to make it better in terms of management of species?
I actually think I think through fisheries management plans we've demonstrated that we actually can take a much more tailored approach to the management that we would like to see in our waters. So we're looking at the international context and the international scientific advice that comes, but the very fact that we can develop these plans then through co-working working groups with our industry, they can actually play a much closer role in developing the measures than if it had been, if we look at maybe through the common fisheries policies, they just wouldn't have had the opportunity to influence the development of the measures as much as they're getting through these fisheries management plans.
You're having to work with what's handed down to you, and you have no ability to influence or change or enhance that. Is that it?
So we can't change the legislative framework. We cannot.
So you've no input whatsoever, or the UK government has no input whatsoever into changing that legislative framework or lobbying to have it changed. Is that what you're saying? No.
The UK government could change it. It's a piece of Westminster law, so yes, it could be changed.
Okay, that's grand. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Chair.
All right, I think that's all the members. So thank you very much for that, Colin, Fiona and Patrick. Much appreciated. And obviously, I think you've asked for reviews, so we'll have a look at that and see what we respond with, if anything.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, members. Obviously, they are looking for reviews, but I don't know whether you want to wait to consider if you want to put anything forward. We can do that next week, or if you have any thoughts now, particularly around what the organisation or the producers' reps had said.
I think it would be, Chair, if you don't mind, I think it would be useful to reflect the concerns of the fishermen, because clearly that they know exactly what's going on. They know how these things will impact on them. So I think it would be useful to know whether the department are going to genuinely take on board the concerns that they've outlined.
Well, is it reasonable maybe that the clerk, sorry about this, draw up a few points from what came out of today's meeting for next week for us? Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
So we can consider?
Yeah, Chair, I do.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 7, members, is the written briefing from the Department on the Inter-tidal hand gathering of shellfish, consultation of responses. Find it at pages 66 to 86 in your pack. The Department has produced a Synopsis report for the publication on the responses to the consultation on the inter-tidal hand gathering of shellfish in Northern Ireland. The executive summary from the report is at pages 72 to 73. Any comment, members? Just to tell you the next steps. In our earlier briefing, we heard about the Inshore Fisheries Management Plan, which includes crabs, velvet and brown lobsters and scallops, king and queen, and associated stakeholder working groups have been established. More recently, the periwinkle working group has been established and will consider further the findings from the consultation within the framework of the Northern Ireland Inshore Fisheries Management Plan. All happy? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 8 is the Department written briefing on the implementation of Climate Change Act 2022. I refer you to pages 87 to 91 in your pack, which is an update on the steps that DAERA has taken so far to implement the Climate Change Act Northern Ireland 2022 and the proposed next steps, and a stated intent to give an oral briefing to the committee in the autumn. Members, I suppose maybe I would have preferred an oral briefing on this maybe at some stage earlier, but it hasn't been possible. So just to remind you of a few issues: statutory 2050 net zero greenhouse gas emissions reduction target, along with interim must achieve targets of at least 48% by 2030 and a 2040 target which is to be set through secondary legislation. Requirements for setting a 5-year carbon budgets to cap emissions. With regards to the carbon budgets, between June and October 23, the Department consulted on the proposed first 3 carbon budgets and the 2030-2040 emissions reduction targets Views were also sought on the advice in the Climate Change Committee report on potential pathways and sectoral actions to achieve net zero by 2050. The level of the carbon budgets is ultimately for the Executive to approve before the relevant regulations are brought to the Assembly. We considered the responses to consultation were considered earlier this year, ahead of publication of an analysis of the consultation responses in May. Department notes that there was overwhelming support from various sectors, stakeholders and the public for setting carbon budgets and targets in line with the Climate Change Committee recommendations. Members, there's a whole lot of issues around that. I'm not sure we can do much at this side of the summer, but clearly, as I recall, I'm not sure which it was, but I did hear at an earlier briefing that some of the targets had been missed so far. I'm not sure whether that's the carbon budgets or not, or the carbon action plans development. Maybe I'm not sure, but obviously it has slipped to some degree. But whether that will mean anything for the 2030 targets, I don't know. But we'd need to hear from the department as early as possible around that. I assume. To be fair to the department, they did bring us in, and I know Declan had attended some of the meetings, and I know John had, and Michelle as well. I'm not sure whether Patsy was there. They brought us in on some of the just updates. I remember one of them was in December and one was September around some of the issues, but that's now 6 months ago, so it would be useful to have a more definitive update. Are you happy enough, members?
Yep.
We, I suppose, have to leave this to the autumn now. Yep. Okay. Agenda item 9 is a written departmental briefing on the consultation on the review of marine licence fees. Refer you to pages 92 to 131 in your pack for the consultation paper regarding the proposed amendments to the marine licensing fees. This is a substantial paper with a lot of detail on the consultation. It annexes A, B, C and D. Please note that there is an embargo on the release of this information until the 9th of July when the consultation will issue. So just treat this with confidence, members. DAERA is the appropriate licensing authority for the Northern Ireland Inshore region, as set out in sections 113(6)(b) of the Marine and Coastal Access Act. Members, there's a lot of detail on that, but have you any comments at the moment, or are you content to note?
Content to note.
Thank you. Agenda item 10 is a written departmental briefing on the UK policy framework on management of radioactive substances and nuclear decommissioning. Find it at pages 132 to 329 in your pack. Quite a substantial item, this, members.
Chair, could I suggest, please, could I suggest that we have a briefing from the departmental officials in this? Could we, please, just at some stage, to go through it? I'm not just quite sure from reading what was presented in front of us here that I'm entirely across all the detail of it.
No, it's quite substantial, Patsy. And I'm just wondering, Clark, maybe you can keep us right. Would it be DAERA officials that would brief us, or would it be?
Yeah, I need to look into that.
But we'll, if it's okay, Patsy, we'll look into that, because I'm not sure if it would be DAERA officials even that would do that or not. But if you're happy enough.
Sorry, DAERA certainly participated in the UK-wide consultation regarding this policy. And
they participated, but I'm just not sure that they would be across all the detail. But
and there was limited responses from Northern Ireland.
Yes, saw that.
Because we have no disposal facilities here, so certainly, if you wish, just
it'd be helpful to hear just what submissions they made on behalf of the department. Then, anyway.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Right for that in the first instance.
Well, okay.
Okay. All right with that, Patsy?
Grand. Thank you.
Okay, members, we'll go on to agenda item 11, which is correspondence. I refer you to the correspondence memo in your packet, pages 330, and the correspondence is at pages 331 to 346. First item is at pages 331 to 332 of your pack, and it's from Mr James Young from Northern Ireland Technology Centre of Queen's University Centre for Competitiveness. Mr Young is seeking an opportunity to present to the committee an update on the current and significant private sector-led project in Northern Ireland agriculture. The project aims to address issues highlighted at Lough Neagh with a number of additional benefits and recovering assets in terms of air and water quality, whilst creating a circular economy where animal waste is produced to provide biomethane gas and other value streams. You can tend to forward this to the department that we have agreed in other issues with Lough Neagh solutions, and we wish to seek an oral or written briefing on this, as it also includes agricultural circular economy elements. Members, if I could suggest maybe we get a written briefing in the first instance. Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Next item, I refer you to correspondence from the department dated 19th of June 2024, pages 333 to 334 of your pack regarding the Seafish Industry Authority Seafish Levy Review. This is a statutory consultation, members, which will run for 12 weeks from the 13th of May. You can tend to note. Refer to your correspondence that Patsy Madlone received from an individual dated the 18th of June 2024, so pages 335 to 341 of your pack, entitled Treatment of Earth Cancer, Producing High Efficiency Feed Protein from Blue-Green Algae. The feasibility study prepared by biotechnology company and the Life Science Research Institute from China. Intent to forward this to the department?
Yeah.
Okay. Patsy, you weren't out seeing that in China, were you?
No, not this time.
Just checking.
They wouldn't have me.
Sorry?
They wouldn't have me.
Okay, members, refer you to correspondence dated 21st of June 2024, page 342 to 345, your pack from Peter McCallion, Clerk of the Committee for Economy, regarding a response that the committee considered at their meeting on 19th of June from the Strategic Investment Board in respect of the ISNI Investment Activity Monthly Reports. Content to note?
Yep.
Refer you to correspondence, page 346 of the pack from the Development Trust Northern Ireland, requesting an opportunity to present a research paper to the committee on rural assets, policy and practice insights for the devolved nations. Intent to add that to the forward work programme.
Yep.
Okay, and agenda item 12 is the draft forward work programme. Refer you to a draft press release prepared by the Assembly Communications in connection with today's visit, which is at pages 28 to 29 of your table papers. Any comment?
No.
Yep.
Current forward work programme and nearly autumn draft forward work programme is at pages 30 to 35 of the table papers. Happy to note.
Yep.
Members, since February we have completed 3 external visits, which includes our strategic planning day in April, and we have 2 planned for September and October, which is Clandyboy Estate and Mount Stewart. In terms of the committee team keeping the required audit trail, I wish to note the process for the record. The visit is proposed in the draft forward work programme. The visit is considered, any visit is considered by the committee at its meeting under the forward work programme agenda item, and the decision recorded in the relevant minutes, which then authorises the committee team to organise the visit and incur any expenditure. If a visit is going to incur expenditure above £500, a business case is prepared by the committee team for approval by the Assembly Senior Management Team. An example of this could be an overnight committee visit. Members, we need to read that into the record, so you all content with that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any other business?
Nope.
Time and place of next meeting is next Tuesday, the 2nd of July 2024, in room 29 at 9:30 a.m. And final session before recess is Monday, the 8th of July, room 30 at 10 a.m. Meeting is now adjourned.